If you haven't heard of Operation Wolf, then just what were you doing in the late 80s and 90s? Because for me it was one of the best arcade experiences you could get. Released by Taito in 1987, the imposing cabinet had one standout feature: an Uzi 9mm.
You know your weapons, buddy.
Or something very similar, at least, primed and ready for action. Stepping into the role of Special Forces operative Roy Adams, your objective is to rescue the 5 hostages in the concentration camp, with each stage progressing an accompanying story, a rarity for shooting games of the time. The Uzi was an optical controller mounted onto a pivot shaft, allowing users to maneuver and elevate the gun where appropriate, with the best feature of all being the simulated recoil, which posed a significant challenge to my adolescent hands. This soldier, tank and helicopter blasting was all good fun, but my first experience of this was actually not from the arcade cabinet. It was here with my ZX Spectrum, playing the Ocean Incarnation released in 1988. The game could be played with the Sinclair light gun, and in fact it was bundled with the Magnum game pack. However, my brother and I initially didn't even have this, so we made do with the rickety Spectrum keyboard and a movable on-screen target. This might seem far removed from the arcade experience, and indeed, it was. But basking in blissful ignorance, I absolutely adored this game. We put countless hours into blowing up the monochrome characters, and probably the hostages as well, for added entertainment. Operation Wolf would grace a variety of home platforms. Some were commendable adaptations, whilst others missed the mark a little. One of my favourites is on the Sega Master System with the Sega Light Phaser, a game I demonstrated in my Zillion video from the other week, and this is probably as close as we could get in the 90s to recreating the Operation Wolf arcade experience within the home. Well, enter virtual reality and Operation Warcade, and suddenly you're in a world of pain. But this is good pain. In fact, if there's one thing virtual reality is perfect for, it's recreating the arcade experience in your home. A lot of VR games will induce queasiness because of the movement, but you simply don't get that standing in front of a virtual arcade cabinet. You don't have to go anywhere, but you do feel like you're right in the middle of an arcade, and grabbing that Uzi simply confirms it. From an outside observer, it looks absolutely pathetic, but in game, well, this is almost perfect. All I need is someone smoking next to me and I'll feel like I'm in the middle of Leisureland in 1990. So what is this? Well, Operation Warcade is created by Ivanovic Games. It's quite a hidden gem, released in June 2017 through Steam, which I stumbled across not so long ago. You'll need a Vive or Rift to get involved, but if you do, I'd say this is almost an essential purchase. I had a quick chat to the developer, who, funnily enough, is called Ivan, and he mentioned this game was made specifically from his experiences playing Operation Wolf and its sequels in the arcades, and this is apparent throughout, as from the off you're plonked directly into an arcade. It's obviously not an official sequel, but I'm here for the experience more than some mysterious loyalty. The initial levels start out like Operation Wolf, side-scrolling, gun in hand, destroy anything that's not pinned down. Compared to the original game, you can do a lot more damage of course, and everything is much more dramatic, but the premise of destroying whatever you see remains consistent. Although there aren't any hostages to avoid this time, and I mean they just got in the way anyway. The virtual reality perspective is quite cool, as you can actually peer round into the screen, so it's kind of half like being at an arcade machine and half being inside the game itself. There are in fact parts where you're transported directly into the game, driving a truck or taking control of an enemy vantage point in a tower, which adds a pleasurable and exciting dynamic to proceedings. You can even fly a plane at one point. Now these are things which Operation Wolf was obviously unable to achieve given the limitations of the 68,000 based arcade board, and even more so with the home versions. The original game did have varied locations however, just like we have in Operation Warcade, with jungles, swamps, deserts, and everything you'd expect from a war-based game. At times it felt like I was in the jungle with the team from Predator, although not to be confused with Predator 2 featuring Danny Glover.
Hey, what the hell is going on here, Hardiman?
That would need a very different game. Perhaps even Predator 2 for the Commodore 64, or even more appropriately for the ZX Spectrum. So much excitement. I often talk about how modern day gaming experiences don't feel that detached from the feelings games in the 80s and 90s instilled, mainly because the technology back then was as amazing to us then as current hardware is to us now, probably even more so in fact. But with Operation Warcade, the home experience of Operation Wolf is really elevated to a new experience, which almost literally brings the arcade into your home, and then splashes in an extra dose of craziness to make a compelling and addictive game. The feeling of getting the double Uzi power up is really pretty special. The only problem I really encountered throughout this experience was some sort of distortion and mirroring effects within the Rift headset, coupled with the intense flashes whilst moving to some of the bonus sections. Hopefully the bug will be fixed in time, and I guess I can just close my eyes while switching to the bonus areas. Usually I'd say that nothing beats the original game feeling, but although Operation Wolf on the Spectrum and Master System were superb experiences at the time, Operation Warcade is something very different and much more pleasing. Plus it doesn't have the shrieking sounds from the hostages of the original. If you've got a VR headset and Steam and a PC powerful enough to play it, I'd recommend downloading a copy and giving it a go. If not, you can always download MAME and just emulate the original arcade game, because frankly, it's still very good even today.
You succeeded in demolishing the communication setup, cutting off the enemy from rescue.